First thing that I want to say is welcome to the 47th annual meeting of AEFP in person. So I'm Jason Grissom, and for 2 more days, I'm the president-elect of AEFP, and I'm so excited to see you all after 2 years of just being a virtual community. It is really nice to be back in person. And I'm going to be very brief so that we can get on to the good stuff, but I want to start with a few thank yous. That's me. So the first thing is I want to say thank you to our conference sponsors. They're up here on the screen. These great organizations have helped to make this year's conference possible. So pay attention to the organizations that are up here, and please join me in giving them a round of applause. The second group that I want to say thank you to is our institutional members. And their support really means not only that we're able to put on a great conference, but also they really enable all the other programming that we do throughout the year. And as a member of AEFP, what you think of AEFP is, it's great people and it's a great intellectual community. But then you're in my seat and you see it's also an organization that has a balance sheet. And so you really appreciate, these sponsoring organizations that really help make what we do possible. So join me again in thanking the institutional members. So my next thank you is to this year's program committee. So the main task of the president-elect, what I've done this year, is planning the conference program. And this great group, which obviously I'm not going to read that long list of names because it was a really large group that helped out this year, but this was a really great group of people who reviewed 644 proposals in a very tight timeline because we wanted to build a schedule and be able to get notifications back to you all first thing in January, and we did that, and I so appreciate the thoughtful work of the folks that were on the program committee this year. Too many people to name, but no, I have nothing but appreciation, and join me again in thanking them publicly. Before I move on to the Pre-Doc Fellows, I do want to insert, there's one other thank you, and it's not in the slides because the person who made the slides was not me, and she wouldn't say thank you to herself, but Lydia Ross, who is our executive director. She is the person that makes all of this happen, trust me. So thank you so much for all the great work. And if you see Lydia, she will be looking very harried out around the registration desk, handling whatever crisis of the moment, but please tell her thank you. Then up here on the screen, we want to say congratulations to the Pre-Doctoral Fellows who were sponsored to attend the conference this year in the hopes of helping us build the pipeline of the next great set of AEFPers, the research pipeline, the policymaker and practitioner pipeline. So if you see these folks around, please say hello and join me in congratulating them. All right, I've only got a couple more. I also want to say thank you to our outgoing board members. The AEFP board is a 3-year term, and you rotate off at the end of that year's conference. And so Patrice Iadarola, who is past president this year, she'll be ending her board service at the end of the conference. But also Brooks, Cassie, Steve, Katie, and Dara, we just really appreciate all of the work that you've done to make AEFP a great organization and your time on the board. This is really a volunteer organization, like people just give their time, and frankly, it's kind of a lot of time throughout the year, and especially, these last couple of years, which have been hard for everybody, and this has just been such a thoughtful and collaborative group to work with, and so we really appreciate the service of the outgoing folks, before you thank them, I also want to say, these are the other folks who are continuing in their 3-year terms. And again, a lot of names up there, so I won't read them, but just know that there are a lot of really thoughtful and honestly very nice, in addition to really smart people who are helping make the association what it is throughout the year. So I really appreciate the work of the great board that we have, so thank you. All right, so speaking of the board, we have some business on that front. And so Brooks, who chaired the nominations committee, is going to come up and talk about the board of directors nominations.
Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to share with you our nominations for next year's board. The election will be held virtually, so please do take the time to vote when you get that email. We definitely want your voices reflected. So let's get started with our president-elect. Colin Chelman is joining us from the City University of New York. Thank you, Colin. Yes. Okay, now our slate, which will be the candidates that you will all vote for. So we'll have at-large candidates, including Rachel Baker, who was at the University of California, Irvine, and she did just recently start at the University of Pennsylvania. We have Sharday Bonilla from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, Morgan Donaldson from the University of Connecticut, Josh Goodman from Boston University, Aisha Hashim from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and Carolyn Satin-Bajaj from the University of California at Santa Barbara. All right, we also have we have two other categories, the private and nonprofit category and the government candidates. So our private and nonprofit candidates are, Ileana Brodziak de los Reyes from American Institutes for Research, otherwise known as AIR, and we have John Vallant from the Brookings Institute. In the other category for our government candidates, we have Christopher Redden from Rhode Island, and we have Dubravka Ritter from the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia. All right, that's our slate. Okay, thanks everybody, and please be sure to vote.
Great. Hi, I'm Stephanie Cellini at George Washington University and one of the editors of Education, Finance, and Policy. My co-editor, Randy Reback, couldn't be here today, but on behalf of both of us, we'd like to first thank all of you here at AEFP for supporting the journal. It's amazing to look around this room and see this incredible community of our associate editors, our authors, our editorial board, our reviewers, and our readers. So thank you for your service and for supporting the journal. We have a couple of awards to give out. The first is the Thomas A. Downs Best Paper Award. At EFP, we appreciate when papers assess the costs of policies and programs. This paper was called by our editorial team the perfect mix of causal evidence and benefit cost analysis. It's certain to be a landmark for researchers and a go-to for policymakers. And I'm delighted to present the award for the Thomas A. Downs Best Paper to the Costs and Benefits of Early College High Schools by Drew Atchison, Christina Zeisser, Salma Mohammed, David Knight, and Jesse Levin. Congratulations. And if they have a representative to come get the award, we have one. Jesse, thank you so much. Congratulations. Congratulations. All right, and we have one more award to give. Every year we give the Anonymous Reviewer of the Year Award, which will no longer be so anonymous, but still very outstanding. And so this year we had a reviewer who gave thoughtful, constructive, and timely feedback with always a positive tone, and we really appreciate these very timely and excellent reviews. So we want to thank Lucy Sorensen at SUNY Albany. Come on up, Lucy. Thank you. Congratulations and thank you.
So it is my honor to be the chair of the awards committee. It is a great, for all the work it is, it's a really fun committee and very rewarding. We get to read about lots of amazing scholars. So I'm going to present some awards today. Now, is there an order that I go in, or can I go in whatever order I choose? Okay. So first, the Jean Flanagan Outstanding Dissertation Award. This year's honorable mention is awarded to Kylie Anglin. Kylie received her degree from the University of Virginia's School of Education and Human Development, where she was mentored by Professor Vivian Wong. Her 3 dissertation essay is entitled Improving Impact Evaluations with Low-Cost, Automated, and Scalable Tools for Implementation Research. In selecting Kylie for the honor, the awards committee noted the importance of implementation research and the challenge of collecting high-quality data in ways that are feasible and scalable. And in her dissertation, she brings a variety of new techniques of data science to this challenge. Kylie's now an assistant professor at the University of Connecticut, where she's continuing this work, melding data science with implementation work. And for her wonderful dissertation, we'd like to award her the honorable mention. Okay, and I assume we're going next to the winner of this year's Gene Flanagan Outstanding Dissertation Award is Zach Bleemer. He received his doctorate in economics from UC Berkeley, where he worked with David Card, among others. He is heading in the fall to the Yale School of Management, where he'll be an assistant professor of economics. His dissertation includes 3 essays examining higher education policies in California. His main essay studies top percent policies and the returns to post-secondary selectivity. He studied a policy implemented at 4 UC campuses, San Diego, Davis, Irvine, Santa Barbara, that allowed students who were in the top 4% of their class to be admitted. It is a tour de force dissertation essay. It's a tour de force book that is in one essay. There's a great reduced form regression discontinuity analysis, and then kind of a second paper built in that is a structural model that was developed to help him and others understand the potential consequences on those students displaced by the policy. And so by combining kind of the structural model with really compelling identification, he's able to come up with interesting and important welfare calculations that assess the entire effect of the policy. His advisor writing a recommendation letter, David Card, writes, "I think you wrote one of the best dissertations I've supervised in 40 years and over 100 advisees." Wow. So and for this reason, we'd like to award Zach the this year's 2022 Dissertation Award.
Thanks very much, Brian. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. This is kind of a guessing game. What's next? Early career? Okay. Early career. So AFP's Early Career Award is intended to recognize junior scholars with exemplary early career trajectories who have made major contributions to the field of education, finance, and policy. The past 7 winners of this award have all come from academia, perhaps not surprising given the composition of the association. And while academics, of course, make important contributions, we know that researchers from think tanks, research organizations, and government agencies are always producing high quality and influential work. And this year's Early Career Award winner, Rodney Theobald, is a perfect example. He's an applied statistician working at AIR in Calder. He received his doctorate in 2015 and since then has co-authored literally dozens of published papers on a variety of topics with a focus on teacher preparation, licensing, hiring, and evaluation. Roddy has contributed, though, more than statistical knowledge to his work. In selecting Roddy, the awards committee noted that he's been a leader in the partnership research conducted by Calder, interacting with state and local practitioners and policymakers at various stages. And so with this award, the committee wants to recognize not only Roddy's tremendous achievement, but to highlight the influential and important education policy research conducted by organizations outside of universities. We hope AEFP continues to welcome such individuals and organizations and to make sure that they're an integral part of our community. So, Rodney, congratulations. Okay, this is a new award this year that is well overdue, the Policy and Practitioner Award, meant to recognize individuals who have fostered or engaged with evidence to improve education policy or practice in the real world. We had a ton of amazing applications from incredible folks for this first year. It was a very hard choice, but the committee decided to present the inaugural award to two practitioners, both working in the early childhood education space, Dr. Jason Sachs and Dr. Jenna Conway. So I'm going to just read a little bit about them, and then we'll call them both up at the same time to receive the award. So Dr. Sachs has served as the director of the Boston Department of Early Childhood Education since 2005. Right from the start, he's built research into the way the district makes decisions. He commissioned the first ever descriptive study of Boston's programs. And then when the results were reported on the front page of the Boston Globe, quoting, "Boston's public preschool and kindergarten programs are hobbled by mediocre instruction, unsanitary classrooms, and dangerous schoolyards." That was his first attempt. He embraced the challenge of improving early childhood instruction in Boston, using evidence and not ideology to guide the reforms. He convened experts across the field to help design a model program, then facilitated the implementation and evaluation of the program, which showed very strong school readiness impacts. Since then, he's worked to disseminate these findings, helped many, many districts, and even some school systems abroad. So the collection of researchers and colleagues who wrote in support of this nomination cite several qualities of Jason's. He, quote, "First, he's absolutely fearless about hearing bad news, recognizing that rigorous data help the program to get better and improve learning for all children. Second, he's highly valued by his colleagues, whom he empowers to do their best work. And finally, he is deeply motivated by social and racial justice." So Dr. Jason Sachs was a well-deserving of this award. Actually, maybe I'm going to change up. Dr. Sachs, please come up now. We're going to recognize you individually. That was great. Congratulations. Okay. And the reason that we have two inaugural winners is, despite the hours of deliberation, we really could not choose. Dr. Jenna Conway is equally impressive, interestingly in the same field. So over the past decade, she's led efforts to build more comprehensive, coordinated, and effective early childhood systems in two states, Louisiana and Virginia. She currently serves as Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Early Childhood Care and Education in Virginia. One of her many accomplishments in the field relates to Virginia's Teacher Recognition Program. Under her leadership, Virginia received a federal preschool development grant and used nearly half of the grant to fund financial supports for early educators. She then facilitated a randomized controlled trial evaluating the impact of these supports on teacher turnover. The findings suggested that they cut teacher turnover of early childhood educators nearly in half. Amazing so far. She didn't stop there. She spoke to the 2020 special legislative session in Virginia, using the results of this research, advocated successfully for an additional $3 million in state funds to expand the program to even more educators. In Louisiana, similarly impressive impact, introducing a set of reforms to improve early childhood education at scale, including a unique accountability and improvement system that involved observing the quality of teacher-child interactions in every classroom in the state twice a year. In recommending Dr. Conway for the award, one recommender writes, "I view Jenna as among the boldest and most effective early childhood leaders and thinkers in the country. I have also been just wowed by how focused Jenna is on data collection and evaluation at every stage. She reads research constantly, invests heavily in data infrastructure, and is focused on understanding diverse perspectives from teachers, families, and providers." So like Dr. Sachs, Dr. Conway's work has dramatically and tangibly improved the lives of thousands of young children, and it's my honor to award her this recognition. And so I think we have one more award that I get to give out. Before I do that, I want to just make sure everyone knows that the award winners are going to be presenting just a little bit of their work at a special session tomorrow. I think it's 10 a.m. And so if you want to meet these superstars in person, get their autographs, and hear about their work, you should definitely come to the session. I'll be chairing it. I am so excited to hear them speak myself. So last but not least, I would like to present the Applied Higher Education Finance and Policy Award. This award is jointly sponsored by AEFP and the Center for University Excellence at American University, and it's designed to highlight applied education finance and policy research with substantial implications for public policy and practice in higher education. I'm going to continue. I mean, the slides will catch up. So I am proud to announce that this year's winner is Judy Scott Clayton, Professor of Economics and Education at Teachers College, Columbia University. But you can't come up yet. I'm going to say nice things and then you can come up. Judy was one of my first students, and since receiving her degree from Harvard's Kennedy School in 2009, she has made extraordinary contributions to higher education research. She did important early work in her career on FAFSA simplification with her mentor, Sue Donarski. And then over the course of her career, she has done influential work on really almost every major topic in higher education. The economic returns to post-secondary degrees and certificates, the consequences of and alternatives to college remediation, the impacts of need-based and merit-based financial aid programs. And yet one of my favorite pieces by Judy is one that I'm not even sure is published in a standard journal, a paper called The Shapeless River that examines how the lack of structure and guidance in college can hinder student progress. And this has been kind of a document guiding a whole set of reforms in higher education around guided pathways and more structured student experiences. So in between all of this research, she finds time to serve on the editorial board of EFP and EPA, testify in front of the U.S. Senate and House, participate in U.S. Department of Education technical working groups, write op-eds and general interest pieces explaining higher education research to a broader audience, and conduct interviews by small unknown organizations like National Public Radio. Judy exemplifies the engaged higher education research valued by the Center for University Excellence in AEFP, and was a unanimous choice of the committee to receive the second Applied Higher Education Finance and Policy Award. Congratulations, Judy. So let's have one final round of applause for all of the award winners.
And Patrice couldn't be here today, unfortunately, last minute. This seems loud. So I get to give the award for our Outstanding Service Award, and I could not be more excited. Because when Patrice told us who was going to get this award, I was like, that's what I wanted to do, and I was going to give the award, so I get to do too. So Patrice gave me some notes, and of course, all of you who know me know that I'm going to add to them. But she made some prepared remarks, so I'm going to read them. And she writes, the Outstanding Service Award recognizes contributions made to public policy, development, research, public understanding, local service, local school finance development, and service to the AEFP. In our pre-COVID world, there was one constant that you could count on from year to year on a Friday of the conference, and that was a New Yorker pulling you to the voting table to give you a ballot, put a hole punch on your badge, making sure you put that ballot in the box, Even though that is second nature for a union rep to do, it exemplifies the deep and lasting purpose of our honoree who worked tirelessly so that each of us and every single member could care enough to have a say in who represents us. So today we honor Joyce Levinson, maybe. Today we honor Joyce Levinson, and through her, our sustaining member of the UFT. Joyce first joined AEFP in 1980. She later served on the board in 2 different roles, as an elected representative of the Teachers Associations, elected in 2007, and as the UFT's representative, a sustaining member beginning in 2010. As our previous executive director, Angie Hull, notes, first, I'd say the role of the sustaining members is just as it sounds. They've sustained what was once a fledgling organization from its inception by not only bringing practitioners to the conference and actively engaging in research discussions, but also supporting the side of AEFP that many don't see, but that's critical, administration and governance. Joyce spent many years in the nominating committee doing the work of recruiting and reaching out to government and practitioner candidates. She was eternally upbeat and prepared, asking clarifying questions well in advance of the meeting, allowing staff to get more information as needed, and in many, many, many cases, copy editing minutes. She has always articulated the importance of teachers and research conversations well before that was in vogue. She showed up to the new member and student events as if it was the first year she was on the board, when really it was like her 20th. She gives direction and feedback, but it's not hard to take from her because she thinks of the group, but also represents her constituency of teachers. I would work with Joyce again every single day of my life, bar none. Past President Amy Ellen Schwartz shares, Joyce has a commitment to equity and fairness in school finance and an interest in evidence about what works to improve practice. And even in an organization full of wonderful people, Joyce stands out for her care and interest in people rather than their professional accomplishments. She always remembers and asks you about you, your family, and not just your last paper. Patrice noted that as a young member of the board, she vividly recalled the passion, the perspective, and the intellect that Joyce brought to her service on the board. Speaking for myself, Joyce is one of the first people I ever met at AEFP, back when it was still AEFA. I was a young doctoral student researching teachers' unions, and Joyce immediately offered to answer my questions, help me think through my problems, and introduce me to any folks who might provide additional insights. She's always been a huge supporter of my research and of the role in AEFP, and as I know she has been for countless others in the audience today. She's always been a critical friend, someone who's not afraid to tell you like it is, but will always support you and help you to become better and more knowledgeable. And she never forgets what's important. Every single thing she has said and done during her time with AEFP has been in support of students and educators. Joyce, you've in many ways been the heart of AEFP, and we are forever grateful for your long service and commitment to AEFP and its members. Don't cry. It is with a great joy and honor that I present this award to you for your outstanding service for AEFP.
Very quick, very quick. Thank you for this award. It really means a lot to me. As Catherine said, my first conference was in San Diego in 1980. I quickly realized that AEFA, as we were known then, was special. AEFP fosters collaboration among researchers, practitioners, and policymakers with diverse opinions and experiences in order to create improved education outcomes. I've met many dedicated professionals working on various important issues. The quality of the membership is truly extraordinary. I love my time with AEFP family and will treasure it always. Thank you.
Okay. When I received the call from Tom in the summer of 2019, asking me if I'd consider running, unopposed, for president of AEFP, I was completely surprised and elated. AEFP is the organization in which I grew up. It has been my intellectual and professional home since I first began attending the conference in 2004 as a second-year doctoral student. I gave my first conference presentation, shaking behind the podium, with several of my academic heroes in the audience. Over the years, I've made strong personal and professional connections through AEFP, and I count several of our members among my closest friends and colleagues. So yeah, I was shocked but thrilled. This organization has given me so much, and I was and I remain eager to give back. Of course, as one does, I began thinking about what I would talk about in my presidential address. I would talk about the importance of research with consequence, applied research intended to foster change and continuous improvement in education policy and practice. The importance of working together with policymakers and practitioners to do this kind of research, so that we are using our knowledge and skills to address the real-life, real-time questions and needs of the people who are devoting their lives to improving kids' and adults' education and long-term outcomes. This is the work for which AEFP is known. But that was summer of 2019, and the world has changed in the last 3 years. And so all the research, the work we all do, must go on and has go on, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. I'm going to talk about something different than I'd planned. Oops, that's not supposed to happen. The last few years have been tough, on everyone, and on some more than others. I'm generally a silver linings kind of person, but even the most starry-eyed optimists among us haven't been able to see the rainbows through the clouds every day, or even most days lately. Not to state the obvious, but we've been living through a global pandemic for the last 2 years. Over 6 million people have died from COVID-19, nearly 1 million in the US alone. Countless others have suffered long-term consequences of the disease, including debilitating symptoms of long COVID, economic challenges, struggles with mental and social health, and something that many of our own members have documented: massive impacts on the academic, socio-emotional, and mental health of our students and educators. And over this same time, we have seen the brutal murder of George Floyd, of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor, of Daunte Wright, and countless other racially motivated killings, alongside countless examples of racism inherent in much of our society. And we've experienced, and some of you have even contributed to and led, an uprising, a demand for racial justice and social justice. As a broader society, we have begun, far too late, to recognize what our BIPOC friends and colleagues have long known, that we are living through a second, longer-standing pandemic that has led to the deaths and destructions of lives and families. And contributing to my difficulty with finding a silver lining, we're watching a war play out. And while Russia and Ukraine are taking center stage, there are other international atrocities occurring and affecting people across the globe. All of this is exhausting. It's exhausting to think about our place in the world and our communities and how we can continue to work to improve the world around us. It is exhausting because when we think deeply about what is happening around us, many of us are stuck in an uncomfortable place, recognizing our privilege and recognizing that with privilege comes responsibility to make things even marginally better for those without or with less. But there is a silver lining. We're growing. All of this chaos, disruption, all of this discomfort we are experiencing on a daily, even hourly basis, it's giving us a chance to change, to be proactive about who we want to be, as individuals, as scholars, as educators, as policymakers. In fact, there's a long line of research that tells us that these kinds of times, the times when we are most challenged, when we are forced the most out of our comfort zones, these are the times when we grow the most. These are the times that we can become growing individuals, and that growth can be immensely productive. So while I, probably like many of you, I'm craving normalcy and comfort, and I'm tempted to retreat into my own little cocoon of familiarity so that I can stop living every minute and every day in a state of cognitive overload, I'm going to challenge each of you and us together as a community to sit in the dissonance a little bit longer. Before you all start whispering to each other that I'm totally insane, let me explain what I mean. Piaget, that psychologist many of us had to read in grad school and then promptly forgot, or I did anyway, called times like these times of disequilibrium. And he, along with a slew of other developmental and social psychologists, posited and had since proved that cognitive growth happens most during these times of disequilibrium or dissonance, especially and mostly when we are forced into new situations with lots of uncertainty. Diane Rubel, another developmental psychologist, shows that during these construction phases, we need to seek out new data, new information, so that we can make sense of where we are and what we are experiencing. And this is precisely when we can grow and learn the most. But critically, this can only happen when we do not retreat into the familiar, the comfortable, or the easy. If we live in the discomfort, we can become better. We can become different. We can expand. We can know more. What kind of dissonance am I suggesting? What more can we be expected to do? I'm going to challenge us to live our mission and vision as an organization. I'm taking this directly from our website, which I'm sure all of you visit often. But in case you haven't memorized all of it, Here's some key text. This all may seem pretty run-of-the-mill, but in this statement, we're asking our AEFP community to live in some discomfort, to welcome a diversity of opinions from multiple disciplinary, methodological, and contextual backgrounds, to welcome scholars and practitioners across all experience levels whose research and practice are based in disciplines, methods, and contexts that may or may not have been traditionally valued and advanced in education policymaking. And importantly, we posit that this is what is needed to accomplish our own mission, to achieve our collective goal, to ultimately improve education policy so that all students have access to educational opportunities and are given the means to succeed in school and in their lives. In other words, we need to get out of our own comfort zones, out of our own boxes, to engage with others who are different than we are, so that we can do the kind of work for which AEFP is known, the kind of work that can change policy and practice, the kind that can inform and improve and provide evidence that policymakers and educators can use to improve the lives of kids and adults. We can accomplish this by increasing the diversity of our membership. I'm thinking of diversity broadly: racial and ethnic, sexual orientation, disciplinary, methodological, diversity of professional roles, so that we can force ourselves to be uncomfortable more often, to be challenged and think deeply more frequently. Not just because diversity on its own is important, but because it will help us to grow, to innovate, to think creatively, and to address new problems or problems that many of us have long ignored. Because we are AAFP and we're empirically focused researchers and users of research, it's important to point out that there's a large and growing trove of research that supports this assertion. Patricia Gurin, a professor emerita of psychology and women's studies at the University of Michigan, compiled and did her own research in support of UM in the lawsuits Gratz et al. And Gooder et al. Versus Bollinger. Her expert report lays out the empirical evidence showing that when people are put into situations that require some disequilibrium or dissonance because we are forced to or choose to interact with others who are not like us, with ideas that are foreign and unfamiliar, we develop deeper understandings of the world and of our role in it. In particular, social diversity, having multiple different kinds of people and ideas and thought processes, fosters civic engagement, helps grow our active and complex thinking processes that allow us to be more reflective and less reliant on the familiar, and improves engagement and motivation, as well as intellectual and academic skills. In other words, diversity of thought, disciplines, culture, background, all of these things will help us to be better thinkers, to produce better research. Diversity is a necessary component of our own efficacy and excellence. We need to be more, not less, inclusive. We need to seek out people who are not like us, welcome them into our community, and truly listen to each other. And we may not always like what we hear, but that's okay. Not everyone's going to agree with me. Some of us love the world in which we become experts in our niche areas. We go super deep and not wide. We want to come to meetings like AEFP so that we can talk to others who speak our own language. And that's okay too. We have space for that. By broadening our scope, we don't have to become less deep or less focused. And this does not mean, as some have told me they fear, that we're going to compromise on quality or on focus or on depth. We don't have to employ the same conceptual frameworks or use the same methods or start from the same lived experiences in order to enter into an evidence-based conversation with each other. We don't even have to agree with each other, but we do need to be open to others' frameworks, methods, and lived experiences. And what's important here is that my vision, my perspectives, my desires, they don't have to be yours. In fact, we're better off if my views and perspectives aren't just like yours. And if we have a community, a family, a culture, and an environment in which you feel comfortable telling me that, and I can ask you why, and we can turn to the empirical research from many disciplines, methodologies, and approaches to help educate each other. The more inclusive we are in accepting of each other's differences, the better our collective work, our collective impact will be. But how do we get there? How do we become an AEFP that is both broad scope and intense depth, that attracts and respects the best minds from all disciplines, methods, backgrounds, and lived experiences? I don't know. But again, I've turned to the research. There are many studies from business, leadership, organization, and education fields that provide insight. One that I like the most is from Damani White-Lewis, and I'm going to borrow liberally from one of his recent articles. The first step, we need to develop and communicate our vision for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We need to develop the shared vision, and then we need to communicate it to our membership and to people who might become part of our membership if we're successful. Then we need to allocate resources that both encourage and sustain activities that will foster diversity and inclusion. Third, we need to make sure that we have supportive people working on this issue within the organization, while at the same time recognizing that it's up to all of us, but especially up to those of us who have been comfortable in this space for so long, to take on the burden of the work, recognizing that we've been comfortable at the expense of some who have not. And fourth, we need to collect the data, monitor the progress, and hold ourselves accountable. We need to highlight and celebrate what is working and figure out what isn't working and why not so that we can improve it. So in that vein, I've already shared some of AEFP's mission and vision, but here's the rest. There are a lot of words up there. They're on our website, so just trust me. These are basically all about diversity and inclusion. This is already in our mission statement. This is already who we strive to be. So what about step 2? What programs are we putting into place to help us achieve this mission? We've set up multiple diversity-focused initiatives over the last few years. They're aimed at several aspects of improving diversity in the profession, including racial and ethnic diversity, diversity of backgrounds, programs, and even profession with our policymaker and practitioner work. We are working to diversify the pipeline of education policy and finance researches. This is the 3rd year of our Pre-Doctoral Diversity Fellowship Program, through which we bring to the conference 10 individuals from diverse backgrounds who are considering doctoral degrees in related fields. This program is intended to introduce these fellows to research and demystify the profession. This year, the Pre-Doc Diversity Fellowship was generously supported by the Walton Family Foundation. We are also actively working to support and develop those who are already part of the education, finance, and policy community. Also supported by the Walton Family Foundation, and in its 9th year, we have our policymaker and practitioner travel fellowships, which have enabled a total of 90 policymakers and practitioners to come to AEFP's annual conferences over the past 9 years. This is also our 2nd year of our early career mentorship program, which is intended to support early career scholars from diverse backgrounds who are first-gen scholars and who join us from programs and universities that are typically not well represented at AEFP. And under the leadership of Dominique Baker, alongside many of her colleagues from SRI, ASH, and AERA, we have co-sponsored a series of workshops on critical quantitative methods, generously funded by the Gates Foundation. In a recent survey of community groups, and this is our 1st year of community groups, which have been wildly successful with hundreds of members from within and outside of AEFP. In a recent survey of our community group members, the overwhelming majority of respondents told us that the community groups solidified their sense of belonging in the organization, noting that AEFP is a friendly, supportive, welcoming, open, nice, and inclusive space. These words warm my heart. These words tell me that what we are doing is working to broaden our proverbial tent. We're also working to include more research and researchers in our conference and membership where diversity is noted by topic, discipline, and method. Here I'm showing you conference papers by topic area, noting that this is just the 2nd year in which we've had a specific topic area for the causes and consequences of inequity in education, 8% of this year's conference papers. And I'm also showing conference papers by methods this year. While the far majority are quantitative, we do have 7% that use mixed methods and another 7% that are entirely qualitative. Step 3, seating the organization and relevant groups with committed individuals. We have, for the first time, created a board committee on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, JEDI, with inaugural chair Dominique Baker. We had a unanimous board vote to establish the committee, and the executive committee for the board are all members. We've also asked all of the other board committees to conceive of JEDI and their work and to report their JEDI activities. We are centering this work as an organization, and our members are stepping up in amazing ways. Here are just some of the leaders in this work. Chairs of some of our relevant board committees and co-chairs of our community groups. Anjali Adukia has done a tremendous job fostering the community groups with dozens of hardworking, innovative community groups co-chairs, setting up programs and networking and Slack channels, things I don't even know anything about. Stephen Hemmelt and Lydia Ross are working hard on early career mentoring, pre-doctoral diversity, and our P&P initiatives. These are just a few of the many people who are devoting time and energy to making AEFP an inclusive, welcoming space. And now we're working on step 4, collecting the data, holding ourselves accountable, figuring out what's working and what's not, and where we need to go from here. This work is not easy, and if we're successful, it won't be easy. But isn't that the exact point? Many of us here this week are scholars and educators. Isn't it exactly our job to be curious, to want to learn new things, to want to answer questions that have plagued us, to solve problems? Isn't it our job to be out of our comfort zones, to be uncomfortable? We do it all the time. We start new research projects, we delve into a new literature or use a new method, we create partnerships between researchers and policymakers or practitioners so that we can tackle the tough questions, so that we can solve the problems that have seemed unsolvable. We continuously place ourselves at risk. And we're used to this kind of intellectual, pragmatic discomfort. What I'm advocating for is to allow ourselves to become uncomfortable in other ways, to purposely seek out the conversations and collaborations and engagement with others who think differently, approach problems differently, and who have lived differently. I'm so proud of AEFP. I'm proud of how we've gotten each other through the last 2 years, how we've strengthened existing bonds and created new ways to form community and support each other, and how we've continued to press on, using our skills to tackle policy problems and problems of policy and practice to help improve education, even as we ourselves are struggling and exhausted and existing in this disequilibrium. And I believe that by remaining a little bit uncomfortable, by choosing to live in the dissonance, this is how we will continue to be excellent and how we can live AEFP's mission to improve education policy so that all students have access to educational opportunities and are given the means to succeed in school and in their lives. And I know that you are up to the task. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. And most of all, thank you very much for being valued members of our growing and diversifying AEFP community.
As Catherine, sort of building on what Catherine just said, so the theme for the conference this year is assessing the responses of education, finance, and policy to the dual pandemic of COVID-19 and racial injustice. And when we chose the theme, the goal was to highlight all the great work that is being done on those topics, in addition to the great work that folks are doing on all the things that are sort of traditional AEFP fodder. But when we chose the theme, we started thinking about, well, who would be sort of the perfect person to come talk to us about the intersection of evidence and data and advocacy in those spaces. And we came up with what I thought was a great person, and that person is Denise Fort, who is the interim CEO at the Education Trust, which is a national advocacy organization often described as the most important truth teller in American public education. As one of the country's leading voices on education equity, Denise is a fierce advocate for students of color, students from low-income backgrounds. She's on the forefront of engaging policymakers and diverse coalitions of advocates to advance progressive state and federal education legislation. Her lifetime of service includes 20 years in senior congressional staff roles on Capitol Hill and a stint in the executive branch, serving in the Obama administration as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and Acting Assistant Secretary in the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development in the Department of Education. Prior to her role at EdTrust, Denise was a Senior Fellow and Director of Public Affairs for the Century Foundation. She's also served as the Vice President for Policy Leadership at the Leadership for Educational Equity, a nonprofit organization supporting current and former teachers in public leadership. She holds a BS in Computer Science from Duke University and an MA in Women's Studies from the George Washington University, and she lives with her family in DC. So Denise was going to join us in person, and we were going to have a fireside chat. We're going to have two nice chairs up here, me and her. When we talked months ago, Denise said, let's do a fireside chat. Let's unpack some of these issues. So that's what we were planning to do until as the person who planned this conference program and has worried about a lot of things over the last 3 months. The last thing I worried about was a Denver snowstorm. Well, that canceled her flight yesterday, and then this morning she couldn't get here in time. And so she's going to join us virtually, and we're going to do our fireside chat with me standing at a lectern and her joining us on these screens. So hopefully Heap is going to make her face pop up there in just a second. All right. Like I said, it's a very excited audience. All right, so we're going to jump right in. We might not have much time. Denise, tell us about the work of Education Trust.
folks, first off, I'm so sorry that I'm not with you, and I can feel your energy. And Catherine, I loved what you were saying before, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I really, really appreciate being with you tonight, even if it's only virtually, and I really hope you invite me back even after today. Something that I heard in Catherine's remarks really struck me. She talked about the tension, right? The tension I think we are all feeling, the pandemic, our regular lives, our professional lives, the tension around the division that we are seeing in this country, both through, the murders of George Floyd, which seems long ago, but again, yesterday, and Ahmaud Arbery. There's just so much that causes us to question what's going on. But what particularly struck me is, how do you break through it all? And I was so glad to hear that you all have identified some ways to break through that tension, because a lot of that is honestly what our work is at Ed Trust. I know a lot of you are familiar with that, but with Ed Trust, but let me just share a little bit. To push on the tension, honestly. And we do that because we think there's much has been missing and is in the evidence. Start to release that tension, or like I said, push through that tension. And we believe that the only way to shine light on so many of the inequities that we see, particularly in education, is through that is the only way we're able to really talk about some of the hard truths that other people don't want to talk about. And so at Ed Trust, my amazing team, several of whom are here in the room today, you're going to hear from Rachel later this weekend. Carol Hedgepeth is there as well. That's what we do. We believe putting data, evidence, research, spotlighting the bright spots, and putting those into the hands of advocates, folks who have previously been set aside from the table, closed out from rooms of influence. So we work closely with advocates, coalitions of civil rights leaders, teachers, parents, business, disability rights advocates, rights advocates, students, really give them help to shine a light in their communities. And we feel that is the way that you can bring about policy change. We are so glad to be able to use your research as well, because so much of it is compelling and really shines a light on these hard truths that honestly are the root of many tensions that people feel that they want to ignore. We're making sure they can't. Thank you for helping us along those roads. The other thing that, and for now it's 25 years, but we've also that during the time when, well, many of you probably know that, Katie Haycock, our founder, really pushed to make sure that federal government, Department of Education, was paying attention to the issues of inequities. Over the time and over the years, John King, our current president, also saw that while the federal government had a role to play, it wasn't playing the role that needed to be played. And we shifted a lot of our work to state advocacy. And so I'm proud to say, along with my dog, that we're now engaging in 14 states. In 8 of those states, we have folks on the ground. Carol is one of those leaders in California, but also Michigan, New York, Texas, Louisiana. I could go on and on. This, I don't know, this is weird. He's very happy with me. To really get into a moment where we could work hand in hand with really strong advocates to identify the issues that these advocates want to make a difference. And then the last thing I'll say is we haven't given up on the federal state feedback loop that we think is really important. So we are still very much advocating at the federal level, highlighting issues like Build Back Better, the American Rescue Plan, and again, using the research and evidence that we know to be compelling to hopefully make change at the federal level that can then be brought to make change in classrooms and districts across the country. And the American Rescue Plan is a perfect example where we were helping to educate members of Congress and the Department of Education about how we directly address unfinished learning, and excited to see that 20% of the American Rescue Plan was supposed to go to those activities. So that's just a few of the examples. I have many more, but I know there are other questions that we want to talk about.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So let's jump into the piece that you were just bringing up about federal and state level education policy making. Do you think we're moving in a direction of being more research and evidence informed, and why or why not?
Great question. Actually, I spent 20 plus years on Capitol Hill, and then also was in the Obama administration. And I can say that I've seen progress in the both amount of research that's getting into the hands of policymakers, amount of good research that's getting into the hands of policymakers, and we are finding some that are really taking the information that they have and trying to infuse policy with that information. It is not every day. It is not in every policy, but it is getting better. And again, citing some examples, everything from juvenile justice reform. I don't know how many of you were doing this kind of work back in the mid-90s when they were talking about young predators, juvenile predators, which had no basis in research. And then slowly but surely, we started talking about the research that said if you prosecute more youth as adults and actually house them as adults, they'll actually recidivate earlier and more often than they would if they had been sent through the juvenile justice system. I think the same can be said for education research. But look, the fact of the matter, you all know this better than me, we do not have enough investment at the state or federal level on the issues around K-12 or higher education. And I think until we can get greater investment, we're still going to have an uphill battle. But counting on you to join alongside EdTrust in the many areas that we're calling for, investing in statewide longitudinal data systems, investing in NCES and IES, investing at the university level through the regional education labs. These are the places that if we had more investment, I feel very certain, seeing all of you, that we could take up that mantle and actually drive some real change.
So that leads me to this. I'm going to ask you, you mentioned EdTrust work around racial inequity and COVID-19 and response to COVID-19, and those are topics for this year's conference as well. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question for each of those areas, okay? So first for COVID-19, can you tell us how research is being used in your efforts in that area specifically? So that's the first part. And then the second part is, what do you need from researchers? That is, what topics do people really need to be working on from your point of view?
Yeah, those are two really great questions. Well, I think I saw a tweet from Matt Kraft, so I think he is there. Matt worked closely with our team on some recent research briefs where we were looking at this question of, what are some of the key things that we know that will help to address unfinished learning? And these briefs talked about, and many of you have also echoed this, we need to do better on intensive tutoring, We talked about who might be the right tutors, what kind of professional development they might need, how to make sure it's aligned with curriculum, what the ratio looked like. So this isn't new. And then again, when looking at unfinished learning, the power of strong relationships. I'm reading about this more and more, and many of you have also done research in this area, because we know that particularly now with so many challenges that our children have been dealing with over the past 2 years, particularly with mental health, loss of life in their families, loss of economic well-being, that having someone that they can hold on to, that they know will support them, that they know that they can speak to, is critically important, and also brings greater attachment, engagement to education. And then accelerated learning, extending the day, making sure that there was more time where children could be learning, and honestly, not just about learning, but bringing to bear wraparound supports that young people could have during the daytime to support them. All of that, great research, all of that, and many of you know this as well, the department was able to cite in their guidance for the use of dollars for American Rescue Plan, and it wasn't just a trust, but they talked about future ed's work, a ton of work that was going on out there, and I was really excited to have Ed Trust work alongside Future Ed and Tom Talk and Democrats for Education Reform and Center for American Progress to actually elevate even more of that work about, how we could tackle unfinished learning. So that's a particular area, and I think you'll see other research cited throughout the department's guidebooks on how to use the American Rescue Plan, which is it's new, it's a big deal, and I'm really glad, because one of the things I first said when the new administration stepped in is, look, you have a ton of partners out there, which is not the case in the previous administration, and these partners, school leaders, state leaders, teachers, researchers, parents, they want to walk with you, and if you give them good evidence of things that work, it's going to be used and it's going to be looked at as a resource. So really happy to see that worked. And I'm sorry, Jason, give me your second question. Lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, you sort of answered it. How you're using it and what you need. Are there other things that you need?
Yeah. Golly, I saw a tweet today about dissemination. I think part of it is certainly making the research more accessible and actionable. That is something that we work really hard on at Trust, making sure that if we're putting something into the hands of advocates almost the next day, if not that day. Honestly, what good is it if we aren't helping advocates to make change, if we're not helping policymakers to bring about change, if we are not informing the narrative about what change looks like in bright spots. And so making sure that the research is actionable is really important. And I will also add, when I was up on the Hill, it was really important to both of my bosses, George Miller and Bobby Scott, that we brought researchers to the Hill to actually share the information, the data points with staff so that they knew of the resources that were available to them. I would really encourage you all, and let me know how EdTrust can be helpful here. But any way that you can start connecting some of these data points for members of Congress in a consumable and actionable way, I think we'll all be better off, and in particular, students of color and students from low-income communities.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. I'm going to give the audience a chance to. I'll ask this last one. Hey, Brooks, can I bother you to grab the mic and if anybody's got a question, maybe signal for Brooks that I just enlisted to circulate. But while we're waiting on that, I was going to ask you if you had, one of the sort of topics for the kinds of folks that attend this conference is, well, how should researchers approach their work to make sure that it gets used? So, people want to see their work in front of the people that are making decisions. And so, you talked about making it accessible, making it actionable, and I wonder, is there more to that?
Yeah. I don't, let me not say this is the only way, but I will share with you some of the ways that we believe that we are making research evidence and data more actionable, more consumable. First off, I'm always pushing my team. I know you want to write 40 pages. I know you want to write 100 pages, and every single one of those pages is really valuable. However, the folks that we want to be able to use this, particularly if they're policy leaders or advocates, your average parent, they are not going to have the entire weekend to really dig in. Are there ways that you can make it more consumable with, top line fact sheets? The executive summary is amazing, but obviously fact sheets with talking points makes it much easier. That's in the most simplistic form, and I am not arguing for, to simplify it so that it's, paint by dots or something like that, or draw by dots. But I am saying that you need to make sure that folks who are reading this, policy leaders, parents, advocates, if that is your audience, can actually take it and then use it. And then the actionable part of it, and this is something that I believe that our interest team does amazingly well, and I am constantly pointing folks to our website for this. We really do try to distill it down so that here are 3 things that you can tell your local leaders. Here are 3 things, questions that you should be asking your local leaders. Here are 3 things that you can come together on with actual talking points, share with policy leaders, and take action. And those are the kinds of things that we get really great feedback back on. We're not saying use the exact language, but sort of here's a template. And more often than not, we're seeing those templates being used, and we're seeing the impact. 2 examples, not saying those are the only ones, but I would really encourage folks to think about, obviously, the audience. And if you are trying to get to advocates or policymakers, mindful of what are the salient points you want them to walk away with, and what do you want them to take action on?
Yeah, so a kind of follow-up question to that is, you mentioned EdTrust work, at both the national level and the state level, that you have a 2-pronged strategy, or attacking both pieces of the federalist structure. Is the role of data, evidence, accessibility, the kinds of stuff you were just talking about, is it different at the state level than it is at the federal level in a meaningful way, or are the strategies kind of the same, just different audience?
That's a really great question. I do think the strategies are really the same. We've been able to, what I mentioned earlier, create this federal state feedback loop. And just to give you an example, ARP is probably the best example. We worked very closely to help educate and inform both what the dollar levels should look like, but also what would be the best way, the most efficient way, and hopefully the effective way of getting good outcomes with those dollars. And once we were able to work, educate, and inform the policy leaders in Congress about what that could look like, we were then able to share that same information with state and local advocates, so that when the dollars were ready to flow, our advocates could be ready to ask the right questions of policy leaders. Are you ensuring that dollars are going to be used for unfinished learning? Are you ensuring, or do you have enough information, a quality high dose look like? How do that your tutors are getting professional development aligned with the curriculum that our young people were getting in school. So it was really a lot of the same information that was going to both the feds and to our state and local leaders, but maybe how they would use that information might be a little different.
Yeah. We're not good on the technology. All right, so Denise, this is your last question,
Yes.
then, and we'll wrap it up since we're running slightly long.
Yeah.
And that's to go back to this piece I asked you before by my two-part question, and there was a COVID-19 piece, and there's a racial equity piece that we didn't talk about specifically. And I am curious because this, as Catherine was talking about, lots of sessions has come up in today, and it will come up over the course of the conference. The problem of racial inequity, the problem of racial injustice is a really thorny one. It's a tough one. It's got a lot of different elements, and this is an education policy and finance set of folks in this room. And so I want to ask you sort of the same question that you answered for COVID-19, which is the what do you need? What does the community of folks like you and advocacy organizations that are working on that topic, what does that community need from this community in terms of the kind of work, the approach to the work, how people should be thinking about the work?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. One thing that I've full on appreciated since my arrival at Trust is this, really appreciation that we are unpacking the inequities in a way that I don't think everybody thinks about. And by that, I might, let me just add, we obviously look at access, right? Access to opportunity. But then we want to go further and look at what are the systemic barriers to that access. Take, for example, access to advanced coursework. This has been a really, I think, compelling policy analysis where we, looked at the data and were able to see that there were a lot of students that were not getting access to advanced placement courses. They should have been. The dog does not like this subject either. He's very unhappy with me. He does not like the inequities. And sort of understanding in many instances, it wasn't that the school didn't have any seats for AP biology, but instead, the young people were not getting access to those seats. Or in other instances, a school might have just AP biology, but not 2 classes of AP biology and another class of AP physics. And then when you looked at access there, it was because some of the teachers were not even trying to identify students of color for those classes. So it's that type of really digging in to understand what are the systems at play that are denying opportunities and denying equity for students of color and for students of low-income communities. We would love more organizations to join us in that effort. And there are a lot of them out there, and we need more, and we need them in every single state, actually looking at what the state-specific numbers are, the state-specific analysis for our Black children, our brown children, our Native Indigenous, across the whole spectrum. I think that is the only way that we will be able to ensure that no one can look away anymore, right? Because the data, as I said earlier, is about shining a light. So people can't just refuse to look at what is going on. So, my message to you all is we know what's happening. You know what's happening. You are able to bring out the data, and we need more of it. We need to be looking at different groups of students. We need to cross-tab it until there is no more cross-tabbing, so that we are not hiding anything and we're not allowing the law of averages to overtake the conversation, and we are not allowing certain leaders to distract from what the data shows. And this is just my last thing, so all y'all can go have a drink on me since I'm not there. I'm sure Jason will cover it. I think part of the distraction that we're seeing in many states right now about folks having the right to access curriculum or book banning is because we're not putting the data out there that shows what's really going on in America's classrooms, colleges and universities, relative to access to AP, relative to grade level reading, relative to whether students have access to public universities based on the data that shows the number of students who are able to go to a public university, data on Black student borrowing. We need more of that so people won't be distracted by all the other nonsense.
Well, that's great. I think that's a great call to action to end on. So join me in thanking Denise Ford.
Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you so much, Denise. And thank you all for sticking with us as we overcome some technical challenges, but we got there. We're only a couple minutes late. So the reception tonight is right out in the Denver Ballroom, just across the little foyer. So head over. We'll continue the conversation. I look forward to catching up with you then. Thank you all.